are not the enemy, Elira. But someone close to us is. Previously on Beneath Velvet Fire, what started as a fake date turned into something heartbreakingly real. Kyan gifted Elira a custom-coded bracelet, one that lights up every time he thinks of her. But even as their bond deepens, shadows of the past tighten around them. Now, in Chapter 9, The Enemy Within, a deeper betrayal is uncovered, an insider who manipulated both their families from the very beginning. And in Chapter 10, Breaking to Rebuild, the moment Elira feared arrives, Kyan steps back, in front of the world. But sometimes, breaking is the only way to rebuild. Chapter 9, The Enemy Within. The early autumn sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Aureus Studios' main conference hall, illuminating desks strewn with blueprints, laptops, and half-drunk coffees. Elira Devienne surveyed the chaos of their makeshift war room, Project Elan's nerve center, where every surface was covered in documents, timelines, and photographs. The air hummed with urgency as her team worked to trace the tangled web of deceit that had ensnared both Devienne and Alarak families for decades. She straightened her blazer and raised a hand. "Everyone, please, quiet." Her voice, cool and authoritative, cut through the chatter. Heads turned. Kyan Alarak rose from the head of the table, laptop in hand, his grey tie perfectly knotted, eyes bright with resolve. Together, they formed the front line against the unseen adversary who had manipulated their grandparents, poisoned their families' legacies, and nearly destroyed the foundation of Project Elan. Elira cleared her throat and began. "We have confirmed that the forgeries and bribes we exposed previously were only part of a larger scheme. New documents show coordinated efforts by an outside entity, someone embedded within a rival firm, to sabotage both Devienne Luxury and Alarak Tech. We need names, motives, and evidence, and we need it now." A murmur rippled through the room. Kyan clicked his laptop, displaying a slide titled Operation Twin Strike, Timeline and Actors. On the screen, color-coded arrows traced connections between shadowy shell companies, a series of offshore bank transfers, and a handful of individuals who had slipped under the radar. Margot Sinclair, former vice president of Man's Innovations, now dissolved. Victor Reyes, independent consultant who serviced both Devienne and Alarak boards in the early 90s. Lawrence Larry Grange, longtime archivist at Devienne's Paris headquarters. Isabel Chen, former head of corporate relations at Alarak Tech. Each name was accompanied by a brief dossier, photograph, known aliases, and suspected activities. But one name stood out, Margot Sinclair, whose elegant portrait, icy blue eyes, precise bob haircut, dominated the screen. Elira exhaled. Margot Sinclair is the linchpin. Man's Innovations was funded by a consortium of investors hostile to both our families. She had access to sensitive board minutes and legal counsel for both mergers. She's the insider. Kyan nodded. We've traced funds from her shell companies to the PR firms we exposed. We also discovered private memos showing she advised both Elizabeth Devienne and Henry Alarak Sr. in the early 1990s. She played both sides, fueling distrust between them. Elira's jaw clenched. We need proof of her direct involvement. Claire Beaumont provided her original board minutes, Margot had the skill to alter them. We need witness testimony from former Man's Innovations employees. A young analyst raised her hand. I located an ex-Man's programmer, Dominic Liu, now living in Geneva. He mentioned something about cleaning the data before the merger vote. She tapped her tablet. He's willing to talk, for the right incentive. Elira exchanged a glance with Kyan. He offered a small smile. Arrange it. We fly to Geneva tomorrow. 48 hours later. Geneva, Switzerland. The city sat picturesque along Lake Geneva's shores, but Elira's mind was on shadows. Dominic Liu's ramshackle apartment overlooked a courtyard lined with chestnut trees still tinged gold. Inside, the air smelled of oily electronics and stale coffee. Elira and Kyan took seats across from a lean, nervous man with haunted eyes and perpetually trembling hands. Elira, softly, Thank you for meeting us, Mr. Liu. We know you worked for Man's Innovations in the early 1990s. You helped maintain their data systems. Dominic nodded, voice low. I saw things. I knew some files disappeared. Minutes changed. But I was young. I didn't question the orders. Kyan, who gave the orders? Dominic swallowed. Margot Sinclair, she said to make sure Debian and Alaric boards never united. It was business. But, he hesitated. But she used my code to erase backup tapes. I realized later it was to hide evidence. She paid me, well, I had debts. Eliara leaned forward. Debts to whom? Dominic's eyes flicked to Kyan. To Victor Reyes. He was her intermediary. He handled payments. I never met him in person, just bank transfers. Kyan's face hardened. Reyes is next on our list. Dominic rubbed his temples. I have more. Emails. Logs. But they're encrypted on my old drive. He reached into a battered briefcase, pulling out a faded USB stick. Everything's here. Please, make it right. Eliara took the stick gently. Thank you. We will. Back at Aureus Studio. 2 days later, the war room crackled with activity as the encryption was bypassed. On the big screen, email chains flickered to life, dated July 1992. The subject line, Operation Twin Strike, ensure Debian Alaric merger failure. Among the senders, Margot Sinclair's corporate email, Victor Reyes' personal address, and a third address, lawrence.grange@debian-archives.fr. Eliara's heart skipped. Larry Grange, the archivist. Her pulse quickened, remembering the dusty basement archives of Debian's Paris headquarters, where priceless documents were stored under his watch. Eliara, Kyan, look at the CC line, Lawrence Grange. He was copying M&S Innovations on every directive. Kyan frowned. He had access to the original, physical minutes. He could swap pages at will. Eliara's voice trembled. My mother trusted him. He was family to her, a friend. She even gave him a key to the archives. She swallowed hard. He betrayed her. Kyan placed a steadying hand on her back. You are not alone in this. She nodded, blinking back emotion. We confront him. 72 hours later. Paris, Debian headquarters. Eliara returned to the hallowed halls of Debian's Parisian headquarters, its grand foyer, marble columns, and the soft echo of footsteps. But now, the corridors felt sterile, haunted by secrets. She wound her way to the archives, heart pounding. Kyan followed, suit jacket hanging loosely from his shoulders. He watched her closely. When they arrived at the heavy iron door, Eliara inserted a card key, one she and her mother had issued to Grange years ago. The lock clicked, and they entered the archives vault. It was cool inside. Rows of shelves held leather-bound volumes, wooden boxes of letters, and untouched folder bundles. At a large oak desk, hunched under a green lamp, sat Lawrence Grange, 30 years older, his proud posture now stooped, silver hair tangled, eyes red-rimmed. He looked up, shock registered, then fear. Miss Debian, Mr. Alaric, what are you doing here? Eliara closed the door. We are here for the truth, Mr. Grange. He swallowed. I didn't know you'd come. Kyan stepped forward, voice firm. We have your emails. We have evidence you collaborated with Margot Sinclair and Victor Reyes to sabotage the 1992 merger. Grange's face crumpled. He leaned back, eyes hollow. It was the only way. I had no choice. Eliara's heart pounded. No choice? You betrayed our families, our companies, our legacy. Tears welled in his eyes. I owed money to Margot. She threatened to expose my daughter's illness if I didn't cooperate. Eliara's breath caught. Your daughter. He nodded, voice cracking. She was born prematurely, had chronic health issues. The Debian Foundation said they'd help cover costs. But then funding was delayed. I grew desperate. Margot offered a deal. I swore I'd only swap minutes pages, just once. Kyan's jaw tightened. But you continued for months. You provided forgeries, backdated documents, everything. Grange bowed his head. I thought I was protecting my family. Elira stepped toward him, tears shining in her eyes. You protected one family by destroying two. He put his head in his hands. I'm sorry. I can't undo it. She pressed her hand to his shoulder. Then help us make it right. 2 weeks later, Global Press Conference, Geneva. Under the vaulted atrium of the Palais des Nations. The United Nations press room filled with journalists, cameras, and diplomatic observers. Elira and Kian stood side by side at the podium, flanked by representatives from both Deviant Foundation and Alaric Tech. The joint statement glowed on the screen behind them. Operation Twin Strike exposed, insider betrayal acknowledged. Deviant Foundation and Alaric Tech unite to repay victims of corporate sabotage. Elira took a breath and addressed the crowd. Today, we publicly acknowledge the full scope of a decades-long betrayal, carried out by individuals who exploited our family's trust for personal gain. Ms. Margot Sinclair, Mr. Victor Reyes, and Mr. Lawrence Grange have admitted their roles in Operation Twin Strike, which sought to sever the Deviant-Alaric merger and damage countless careers. We offer a sincere apology to all who were harmed by these actions. In partnership with the UN and international legal authorities, we will ensure full restitution to affected parties and stronger safeguards against such manipulation in the future. A dossier of evidence was handed to the chief prosecutor. Kian stepped forward, voice clear. We also commit to transparency. This collaboration between Deviant and Alaric transcends past grievances. Project Elan stands as proof that truth, once uncovered, can unite rather than divide. Together, we will build a legacy defined not by rivalry, but by integrity. Applause thundered in the chamber. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters shouted questions, but Elira and Kian turned to each other, hands brushing, a silent vow that they had vanquished the enemy within. Ephemeral moments, private reflections. Later that evening, back at the Aureus studio rooftop, Elira and Kian stood in the glow of lanterns. The Paris betrayal had cut deep, but it had also forged an unbreakable bond between them. Elira's voice was soft. I never expected to uncover my family's history and find someone I trusted at the center of it. Kian wrapped an arm around her. You faced the truth with courage. You pulled down the masks again. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. And I couldn't have done it without you. He kissed the top of her head. We're partners in every sense now. No secrets, no rivals, just two people who trust each other. She smiled, tracing a finger along the edge of the silver bracelet at her wrist, still glowing softly, still a silent testament to his thoughts. The enemy within is gone. Now, we build something stronger. He lifted her face, eyes shining. Stronger than stone. Kian, whisper, stronger than steel. They kissed under the autumn sky, two hearts united by love, truth, and the shared victory over betrayal, ready to face whatever storms tomorrow might bring, together. Chapter 10, Breaking to Rebuild. The morning sun rose over Estoria like a lie, golden, bright, and warm, as though the world wasn't crumbling in silence. The palace was unusually quiet. Tense. Elira sat by the window of her quarters, her fingers loosely cradling a porcelain cup of untouched tea. The light danced over the steam, but her eyes were lost in a haze. Her heart beat slow and heavy, like a drum submerged underwater. Yesterday, everything had changed. The masquerade, the whispers in the court hall, and the sharp-edged gazes that sliced through her on her way back. Rumors spread like wildfire, that she and Kian weren't just political puppets anymore. They knew, both families knew. What they didn't know was that she had only just started to understand the way her heart reacted to Kian. How she'd begun to laugh at his absurd metaphors, how she'd started waiting for his knock at her door even when she pretended she didn't. But love was a luxury neither of them could afford now. A knock sounded, not his. It was her aide, eyes wide with panic and pity. The council has summoned you, Your Highness. Lord Therion and Duke Vallis are both present. Elira nodded slowly, placing the tea down without drinking. She rose, smoothing the creases of her ivory dress as though preparing for battle. Because she was. The council chamber smelled of old stone and sharper judgment. Kian was already there, dressed in House Therion's traditional navy, his silver emblem gleaming on his chest like a curse. His eyes didn't meet hers. Her heart skipped. Princess Eliora of House Valleys, the Chancellor announced. Kian stood straighter, but he didn't look at her. Not once. Her father, Lord Valleys, stepped forward. Eliora, explain yourself. Her voice came out steady despite the pounding in her chest. There is nothing to explain. Duke Therion scoffed. My son sneaking out past midnight, whispering secrets with his future rival, is nothing? We are allies, are we not? She countered. You know very well what the alliance is meant for. Her father's voice was low, dangerous. Control, power, not romance. Kian's jaw tightened. The Chancellor cleared his throat, his voice neutral but cold. The nobility has begun to question the integrity of this treaty. There are rumors of favoritism, of backdoor negotiations, of feelings interfering with duty. The word feelings was spat like poison. Eliora glanced at Kian then. Just a flicker, but he didn't return it. His shoulders were stiff, his face blank, a mask perfected by every prince trained for war. Lord Valleys turned to her. As of today, you are to maintain only formal contact with Lord Kian. Any deviation will result in revocation of your privileges as head of House Valleys. Understood, she said. Her heart was bleeding, but her voice was steel. She turned to leave. Just one look, Kian. Just one. Princess, his voice stopped her. She turned, hope blooming despite everything. His eyes finally met hers, and they were strangers again. Let us not forget why we are here, Kian said, loud enough for all to hear. Duty must come before everything. Personal sentiments are irrelevant. Her breath caught. It felt like being slapped. Harder than she thought he could ever hit. I agree, she said, voice ice. From now on, you are a soldier of Therion to me. Nothing more. She walked out, her head high. Only when the door shut behind her did her fingers tremble. Eliora spent the next week in silence. She attended meetings, signed papers, gave orders, and spoke to no one about him. Not even when she found his scarf folded carefully in the drawer where he'd left it that night after she'd fallen asleep mid-strategy session. Not even when her hand hovered over it for 10 whole minutes before closing the drawer again. Kian, meanwhile, did his part in the cruel performance. He laughed a little louder in public, trained harder, nodded curtly when their paths crossed, avoided lingering. The court applauded their restraint. Their enemies breathed easier, but Eliora felt as though something had been torn from her, slowly and with surgical precision. She couldn't blame him. He was protecting both of them. But the knowledge didn't dull the ache. 3 weeks passed. The palace grew colder. Even the candles seemed to burn with less conviction. One evening, Eliora found herself standing in the training arena, the place they used to argue over sword grips and banter about battle formations. Now it was empty, ghostly. The torchlight danced along the weapons on the wall. She picked up a rapier and stared at it for a long moment. I thought you preferred daggers, came a voice behind her. Her grip froze. Kian. He stood just outside the shadows, arms crossed, expression unreadable. I changed, she said flatly. I heard, he said. You've been different. Wasn't that the point? He flinched, just slightly. Eliora, don't, she said, turning to face him. Don't say my name like you didn't slice it from your tongue weeks ago. Silence fell like a thunderclap. He stepped closer, but she didn't move. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you said. And you were right. We forgot our place. No, he said sharply. They forgot what we are. And what are we? She whispered. For a second, the mask cracked. His eyes softened, voice almost a prayer. Two souls who finally found something real. The tears threatened, but she refused them. You abandoned it. I protected it. By making me feel disposable? He took another step, close enough for her to feel his warmth. I would rather be hated by you than watch you be destroyed because of me. I would rather burn with you than freeze alone. The silence grew loud with what they weren't allowed to say. He reached for her hand, slow, uncertain. She didn't stop him. Their fingers touched, not like lovers, but like two people grasping at wreckage in a storm. I'm still here, he whispered. Even if I can't show it. She closed her eyes. So was she. But that didn't mean it was enough. The next day, she received a letter with no seal. The betrayal runs deeper than politics, it read. Your fathers were not only manipulated, they allowed it. Find the ledger hidden in the Northern Archives. You'll see who the real enemy is. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was unmistakably Kyan's. Eliara burned the letter after reading it twice. And then she moved. She had a war to win. And if they had to break to rebuild, so be it. One betrayal, one heartbreak, and two people caught between love and legacy. Eliara stands stronger. Kyan walks away, for her. But is silence really the end, or just the moment before they choose each other again? If this story touched you, subscribe to The Velvet Story, where every chapter is a whisper of fate and a storm of feeling. Like, comment your favorite moment, and stay tuned for the next chapter of Beneath Velvet Fire.